Okay. Now, have you ever thought of climbing a mountain? One day, when I was looking out my kitchen window and looking at Pikes Peak here, looming over the city, I thought to myself, I need to climb that mountain and get it off my bucket list. I had this idea that in January of this particular year, I would train and go on this sponsored hike in September. Of course, I had to rope in my friend to do it with me and make this her dream too. So I was determined to make the climb. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pikes Peak, a little bit about the training, a little bit about the gear that we have, and so come and relive my journey with me. Legends have been made on my mountain, as I've come to call it. People have been walking it, climbing it, auto racing on it, going up on mule, and there is a railway. In my younger days, I drove my Volkswagen to the top, and I've taken the railway numerous amount of times. But now I wanted to walk it. Pikes Peak is 14,110 feet tall. There's a wonderful restaurant and gift store at the top that has great donuts and hot chocolate to reward you for your efforts. And on New Year's Eve, the Ataman Club shoots fireworks off at midnight on top. According to the Wild West magazine, Zebulon Pike, for whom the peak is named, never summited Pikes Peak. But Catherine Lee Bates went up on a mule, was so inspired that she came back and wrote a song about it, America the Beautiful. Now I was more determined to train. Betty Erickson of the Boulder Daily Camera suggested in her article that it was moderately difficult to climb Pikes Peak because of the great elevation change. It's 13 miles to the top, but there's a 7,500 about elevation change in that 13 miles. So my friend and I's training, we would load up our backpacks and we would trudge around the city for miles. And it was a particularly rainy year that year that we were training. And we would come home very tired and very soggy. So, but one nice day in July, we decided that we would walk halfway to Bar Camp just to see if we could get there in the allotted time for the actual climb date. Happily, our training paid off. Climbing takes some special gear, according to Deb Accord, who points this out in her article, Doing the Peak. You have to have some good boots, 2 pairs of heavy socks, a weather jacket with some layers underneath it, some rain pants. These hiking poles help with the traction on the hill. And most importantly, you have to have a backpack with a hydration system in it. And we had to be able to carry enough water in our backpack to make it to Bar Camp, where we would then refill our backpack to make it to the top. And water, of course, is H2O, has a lot of oxygen in it, and as you climb higher and higher, you need more oxygen. And so that's what the water helps you do that. Since neither my friend and I had never walked any part of Bar Trail before. We had no idea what the terrain was going to be like. But Matt Carpenter wrote this great article called Pikes Peak Bar Trail that goes into great detail about what the terrain was like. But reading about it and actually living it are two different things. So we started out at the trailhead, and you immediately find the W's, and they're 13 switchbacks that are very sharp. It's usually very crowded with a lot of people who think that they can attempt to climb Pikes Peak. And after the W's, you walk a little longer and you can finally see the top of Pikes Peak, but it still looks very far away. The 2-mile part that kind of lulled me into a false sense of security was very meadow-like, long, wide, meandering paths, even some little downhills. But halfway you get to Bar Camp. And at Bar Camp, there's a lot of people milling around, using the facilities, and most importantly, restocking their water supply to get to the top. So after a brief rest, we continued our walk, and the next point of interest that you see that helps you track where you are is an old A-frame house. And that just shows you where you are in relationship to where you've been. Above tree line, the mile markers start. So you see 3 miles to the top, but there's still another 2,000 feet in elevation to go at 3 miles. At 1 mile, you think, or I thought, oh, 1 mile, that's easy, I can do 1 mile. But it was the longest 1 mile I ever did, because you're walking on these boulders that are about, stepping on them, that are about hip high. Anyway, when my friend and I finally made it to the top, we were euphoric. So for those who decide they want to attempt to climb Pikes Peak, there's a wonderful website called Hike Pikes Peak, and it has all sorts of tips and things that you might not be aware of if you want to do this. So some of the tips that they have are start early, pre-dawn, because sometimes it takes 4 to 7 hours just to get to Bar Camp. And remember that Bar Trail is one of the most popular trails there are to get to the top of Pikes Peak, and it can be very crowded. Also, with the change of elevation, it can get cold. Change of the weather can rain, so pack accordingly. In conclusion, I've told you a little bit about Pikes Peak, the gear you need, the terrain, and some of the training we did. And I want to thank you for reliving my journey with me. And I just want to say that if I can do it, anybody can do it. And carrying on.